So, while I'm working on episode 17 of Project Makirraji, I figured I'd give you a bit of a behind-the-scenes video showing how I make most of the art in my videos. So as you've probably noticed recently, I switched from true pixel art to pixelated 3D models. However, during the production of episode 17, I have developed a method that I think meshes the two art styles well. To be clear, there is probably a way more efficient way to pull this off, but this is how I do it. So, first things first, I open up Blender and delete the default cube, obviously. Then I bring in a curve object. I like to use these because they are easier to work with than sculpting and such, and have an organic shape. So right now I start by giving the curve some depth before remembering I need to decide what to make. Eventually I decide to just make a random alien dude and begin work on the body. I stretch and scale the curve, and sometimes I put a bunch of points close together for creases and a segmented look, as you'll see here soon. Once I get a shape I'm happy with, I move on to the head. I decide to give this guy a nice bunch of tentacles, as any good alien should. Again, I use a curve object and use the mirror modifier. Next, I make some eye stalks so he can see over his tentacles. Once I have everything the way I want it, I move on to the legs. I decide to give this alien some really funky legs that bend every which way. I add 2 at the front and 1 at the back in accordance with the body thickness I established earlier. Now that's the basic modeling done. And finally I decide to add a camera. I also remember to change the render size and sample amount, which are the most important parts of achieving the pixel effect. And some lighting. Now I can move on to the shading. The shading is actually the most complicated part of this whole process. First, I bring over a bunch of materials from another model so I don't scratch. Right now I'm giving every object a completely white kind of cel-shaded material. Then I render the image, and since I changed the scale and samples, it comes out pixelated. I'll save it for later. Then I give each object a different one of these brighter materials. This will all make sense soon. I render this one and also save it for later. Next is my favorite part of the whole process, the colors. This is where we actually decide what colors this creature is going to be. I open one of my shaders and delete some of the old nodes. I'm not going to explain all the nodes here, you can take a look. Now I make some changes to the base shader to get the pattern I want. I decide this alien is poisonous, so I give it some contrasting aposematic coloration. I duplicate the whole thing and put them through a mix shader, changing some things around, giving it a cleaner look. Once I'm happy with it, I go around and match every other part up with the body. Once that's done, I render the image and save it too. But then I get a head-on look at the guy and have an idea. I go back and decide to give his tentacles red tips. Then I render this last image and we're done with Blender. Next I open my pixel art software of choice, although it doesn't really matter what you use. After importing all the images from Blender, I open the one where I used all the different colors. This was so I could see each individual body part. I go through and outline each limb and extremity where it intersects with something else. These lines will become the darker shadows that are less for shading and more so people can tell what is what. Once I'm done with that, I bring up the white render. This will become the actual shading. I delete the gray background and clean up any render mistakes. Then I delete the lightest color. I duplicate the layer and separate the 2 remaining shades. I color each one black. I set the darkest shadows to 25% transparency and the lighter ones to only 15%. Lastly, I open up the full color render and remove the background. Then I reveal each layer of shading one by one and combine them to form the finished creature. It's a bit risky to use darker colors since it can obscure the shading, but I think it turned out well. This is the process I'm now using for all of my creatures, so expect to see a lot more of it in episode 17. This video is way different from my normal one, so thanks for watching all the way through. If you want to see more behind the scenes videos, let me know, or any other shorter videos I could make in between big ones like episode 17. Thank you for watching.